It does take some time for students to get used to jobs, especially if it's something new to them. Because oftentimes you'll get groups of students where one student will want to do all of the jobs, or one student won't want to do their job. But when we use these regularly, or when we use these all the time in our classroom, they get used to them and they understand that they have to do their job in order for the experiment to be successful. Another aspect I want to talk about is called the zone of proximal development. That basically says that we want to pick instruction for students that is not too difficult and not too easy. You want to find the concepts and instruction that is just right for those students. If something is too hard, students will often get frustrated and give up, and then you'll see a lot of behaviors come out of that where they don't have the confidence to do the work, so they seek attention other ways, like shouting out or being disruptive to the classroom. The same thing can be said with instruction that is too low. If something is too easy, students might finish the work very quickly and again be disruptive to try to get attention different ways. You find when instruction is just right, when it's not too hard and it's not too easy, students are more focused and challenged, and they pay attention and are less disruptive in the classroom. I'll stop here to see if you have any questions.
Hello. Yes, Perry, I have one question. How do you get the zone of proximal development right? Is it by trial and error, trying different approaches? Or do you have like a technique to be able to determine what is just right for students to be engaged, not do the tasks too quickly and get uninterested? Or is it something that comes, I know it would depend on the students, obviously, and the environment they are in, but my question is, do you have like a technique to be able to determine that?
That's a good question, and it's something that we are still doing every single time we teach. We teach the same topic to multiple groups of students, and how we determine whether or not something is going to be just right. We go off what we call our standards. So we said we look at what fifth graders in our area are supposed to know. Sorry, 10 and 11-year-old students are supposed to know. And even then, sometimes our concepts are a little too easy or they're a little too difficult. So when they're too difficult, we add what we call scaffolds, which Miss Bunting is going to talk all about in just a second. Basically, we help them, or we will make it a little easier for them in that moment. But really, it is like what you said, it's all about trial and error. When you are working with a group of students or an age of students, you begin to understand and you can make rules on where you think they're going to be, and then adjust it either higher or lower from there.
It is also important to make sure, or sorry, not sure, but it's important to understand the level at which your students are at. And so when you, as an educator, have an understanding of the level that your students are able to perform at, that is how you can kind of make sure that you're in that zone of just right when we talk about proximal development, so that students are able to be successful and feel successful when they are learning the topics that you are teaching them. And that's what this means by just right. And students feel as if they are successful in their learning. And you as an educator have to try and understand what level the students in your class are at, and that will be, it'll help you with being able to be in that just right category with your students. Does that help, Emmanuel?
Yes, that helps. Thank you. I think there's another question in the room.
Okay.
Hello. I wanted to ask this question. Given that our classroom sizes here in Cameroon ranges mostly between 60 to 100, how do we group our learners and assign everyone to different tasks? Given the time for a lesson is not that much, how can we do to group a classroom size of 60 to 100 students with everyone having a different task? Thank you.
Do you have a way of like testing your students to see at what level they are at when you have them in your room? Do you have some sort of a way to find out what students are at what level or what their ability is?
Mostly here in Cameroon, we use just a summative test and the formative. That's just the way we test them most of the times here in Cameroon. Mostly the summative, because even with the formative, you cannot go through the whole classroom because it's time consuming.
Yeah, I have never worked with that amount of students. What are some things that you do?
Yes, that's why implementing STEM here, it's also difficult for us. We always think of the classroom size, which is too big, which makes the STEM curriculum to be really difficult for us, because one of the challenges we are facing in is the class sizes. Thank you very much.
Another thing to consider is showing them the jobs that Perry just put on screen. And because your class size is so large, if you can either work job by day, like you can maybe do a day that's engineering, a day that's chemistry, a day, you know, then that way you can do a job each day because you have so many students. Or you can divide them evenly and then maybe try to get them to change jobs throughout the day, because that's a large number of students to have, and you may not have the time for them to, you know, change jobs more than once. So you maybe can do a day of focus. You could do one day is focused on chemist, one day is focused on mathematician, one day is focused on, you know, you could do it that way, or you try to evenly divide them, and then they get a chance to learn all the jobs, and you change that the next day. Is that something you think could work?
I think that can work actually, because when we increase the groups, instead of working with 4 students in large classes, you can increase to maybe 6, 7.
Mm-hmm.
And then increasing that, you equally assign the students different tasks.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and we have the jigsaw groups that we can equally benefit from. When
Yes.
you do that, you'll be able to work with many students and then alternating. You can see assign them different tasks which are maybe similar with the same topic. Since you have to complete their work, you give them different tasks. This group may provide this, and then this group, this product, but they learn the same skills, they acquire the same skills within the period.
Mm-hmm.
So I wish to add that based on the ZPT, the zone of proximal development, when you talk of level, you assess the level, because you assess the level of the students equally knowing their class and their level of cognitive development as well as the age. You know that these are the tasks that you have to give. The key important thing there is that you have to assess that level through prior knowledge to know what is right, just right, if they are low or if they are high. That's what I wanted to add on that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
And to add on what you just said, when we assess our students with their level, then you can even give student leaders within your groups. So if you make a group where you know that you have a student that is strong in this subject, then you can make them a leader in that group to help support the other students in that group. So while you as an educator are walking around and helping your other groups, you can ensure that one of those students in your groups that you create is there to support those other students until you are able to get there yourself and really be a support for that group, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. That's great.
Other questions?
Yes, one more question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, please, I also have this worry. At times, because all of them are students, they're in the same class, which means they have the same level. Then now you assign a task to them. And at times you give individual task or group task, but within a minute, you discover another person is over. He's done the task, went far more than you expected. Then the next 5 minutes, another group is finished or the student is finished and has done it very well. But you give others even 2 weeks, you discover that you still need to come and assist them before they can accomplish the task. In that case, how can this situation be handled? And because we have a problem here, you don't have time for individual students to follow them up. You have your hours assigned to you, and when they are over, they are over. You only forging ahead with your work. Thank you.
Can we, Emmanuel, can you ask that gentleman, can you clarify a little bit about, if I understand you correctly, you don't have enough time in your day, and even though you've assigned some tasks, when it's over, you're not able to reconnect or follow back up on what you've done the day before? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's what he means, Stephanie.
Okay, and so he's asking, how do we keep the engagement when they come back the next time?
Yes.
Okay. So for us, there's 2 different ways to answer that. For STARBASE, we get a different group of kids every day. And so our kids come for 5 days, so they come 1 day a week. For example, Group A will come every Monday for 5 weeks. Group B will come every Tuesday for 5 weeks. And so we have the luxury of having a schedule and that same group coming back, so we can reconnect in that way. Kiana and Perry, before coming here, had kids that came to school, same group in the classroom every single day. So for you all, what I would say, and I'll let Kiana and Perry chime in, is that you might want to find an anchor, like something that will be always shared regardless of when the kids come back. So then they have something that connects them all the time, no matter when they show up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So to bring back what Perry shared about phenomenon. Excuse me, give me 1 second. I'm gonna reshare my screen. When you start a science project, sorry, I'm gonna make sure you can. This doesn't work. Okay, there we go. I got it. So when you start with this concept of a phenomenon during your lessons, you will teach whatever that really exciting science experience is happening. And then every time you go back, you bring back up this phenomenon and you ask students to build on what you taught them the day before to help better explain why this phenomenon is happening. So when you start off with this concept of something that we don't explain off the top of your head, but is explained by science, and you have students bring it back every time you start the class, it adds engagement. So it's like building blocks on top of their learning every time they come to class. So you teach a part of this phenomenon in a class period, and then the next time you come back, you have them think about why did this happen, and then adding on the prior knowledge that you gave them the day before. So that by the end of whatever unit you are teaching, they should be able to explain the phenomenon because you built on it every class that you saw them, and you brought them back to this topic to help them be engaged and have some excitement about every time you learn this lesson, you now learn something new about why this happened. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's why we use phenomenons as an engagement strategy, so that students have something to learn about and build on when they are coming to your class to learn about whatever science or engineering topic that you're explaining to them.
Great. Thank you, Kiana. Another question?
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to add to the fact that sharing the students as in groups, it is also important to do the grouping sometimes, like in the Cameroonian context, as per their quarters, like where they live, their addresses, yes, their neighborhoods. Because it is true that in every class, there must be some intelligent students, and there must be less intelligent and some that are not very much likely to understand the topic what you're teaching. So grouping them by quarters also enables them to work back at home, because if they're in the same neighborhood, they can easily come together in the neighborhood and work, might be at night or during their free time or out of school hours. Also in class, it works for me, especially in the engineering section, that I group them also. Like I assign heads to all the groups. They are the most intelligent ones. I assign them as the head, and I give them a task, and I tell them that if they don't make the others understand it, it means they have failed. So it becomes a burden to them to see that the others must understand. So even during their free time, they must make sure that the less intelligent ones understand the task. If not, they have to report it back to me, and I will tell them that you're a failure. So when I tell them that, they don't want to hear that. So they must try as much as possible to make the less intelligent ones understand that we have to do this. Thank you.
What she's saying is very important, and it answers the question or the worry of large classrooms. The STEM approach to teaching has that peculiarity that learners have much more to do away from school. And so even with a class of 60 learners, you can have a group of 10 groups, that's 6 groups of 10 learners each. And like she's saying, chosen strategically to see that learners who live in a given environment can be together, and then you technically can see that the most intelligent learners are spread across the group. When you come back to class, your class time on that particular project is about feedback, presentation. And she has rightly put it. You are a group of 10. This is the task you have to carry out. There's a group leader, but for presentation, any one of you will be chosen to present, which means that whether or not you contributed an idea, you have the duty to appropriate the whole knowledge that has been generated by the group. So we shouldn't be scared about our class sizes. I think what we need is just get courageous, appropriate the approach, and get implementing. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all for the wonderful contributions. Is there any other question? All right. No question yet, Tiffany. So I think we can move on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, that was great.
All right. Finally, we want to make sure we mention that finding students' interests in what they're learning about is very important. So when the topic that we are learning about comes from students, it is much more powerful than if that topic is coming from a teacher. Oftentimes, in order to get this information, you might start with a student survey or a survey for the classroom, where you just talk to the students, ask them what they're interested in. This can also come from one-on-one conversations with students or with groups of students. And it also can come from talking about current events that are happening in your community. When they feel this connection and the topic comes from them, they are much more likely to stay engaged for a longer period of time and be interested in the topic as a whole. We'll stop there to see if there's any questions.
Any questions? No questions, Perry. So we can move on.
So that was our section on engagement. If anyone has any last questions on how you can engage your students in their learning.
Question on engaging students? Okay, I don't think we have any other question, Kiana.
Okay, no questions. Okay. So this next section is about how do we help our students that are not performing as well as your other students. And so you asked yesterday about how do you be able to support students in your classroom that aren't as intelligent as other students in your classroom. And so here we call that a scaffold. And so a scaffold or scaffolding in your classroom is a temporary support to help students be able to understand the concept or skills that you were teaching to make them be more independent learners. So this happens so that we're providing assistance to these students so that they can perform a task in that day that you are working on it that would otherwise might be hard or challenging for them. And so I'm going to go through some strategies that you can use in your classrooms. Obviously, this isn't everything, but these are some that I have found successful in the classrooms that I have taught in. So the first one is, it is important to plan ahead of time to help the students who may have a hard time understanding a lesson. So I understand that your class sizes may be very large, but when you assess your students and their abilities, you as an educator have the ability to plan ahead some of these scaffolds so that you can have students successful in your classrooms. So when you are planning your lessons, you can also plan some of these scaffolds so that you can help students be successful in their learning. Do you have any questions about the idea or scaffold that might look like for planning ahead?
Okay, one question.
Yes, perfect.
Thank you for this opportunity again. I wanted to ask if scaffolding has also to do with the differentiated approach, where you have more interest on the learners who are slow in learning.
So scaffolding is a type of differentiated approach. So they kind of go hand in hand. So when you are creating scaffolds, you're also in a way differentiating your instruction for your students. And as I go through some of these examples, I will explain how you can scaffold as well as the way you can differentiate your instruction with these scaffolds. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that answered the question. Another one.
I just wanted to add some flesh to it. I
Yes.
think the term scaffold already implies differentiation. Because you are providing support to learners so they can get to another level. I just wanted to add some meaning so that we can understand what scaffolding means. You break down a task into smaller tasks so that by understanding the smaller task, the students can get to understand the big task. And I understood this term scaffold by understanding the engineering meaning of scaffold. You know how they build a bridge? Like this platform when it was built. They put sticks and then they put the bricks all around. By the time they are removing the sticks, the platform is standing. So I think that is how I see the meaning of scaffold. So breaking down tasks to smaller tasks so that by understanding the smaller task, the student gets understanding the bigger one. And that can only go with differentiation because you only attend to a student based on what his challenge or her challenge is. Thank you.
Any other question? All right.
So in like a non-educational sense, like a scaffold in a real world could be when you have children, you are scaffolding their learning when you teach them how to walk or how to eat, right? You don't hand a 2-year-old a big spoon and have them eat it, right? You are breaking down the task for them to learn how to eat. And so that is what a scaffolding in real time would look like as a teacher. And again, I'm going to go through some strategies to help you better understand what a scaffold looks like and how you can use it to support your students. So we'll keep going. So one of the ways that you're able to scaffold your learning for your students is you can connect to their prior knowledge or what they might already know about a topic. So when you start off a lesson, you can ask students what they might already know about what you plan on teaching them, and then allow them to share that out with their peers. And from that, other students can then take what another student might say and then gain a little bit more understanding based off of other students' experiences. So when we talk to students and we ask them about things that they might have already experienced, so if you're doing a lesson on, let's say like weather or weather systems, you can ask students about what they already know about the weather, and they can talk about, they know that it rains or that you have different seasons, and these seasons bring different types of weather patterns. And when you have these discussions with your students, they are able to, by discussion with each other, hopefully be able to connect their learning to what they have been experienced in their past with their own life outside of school. Does anyone have questions about asking students about their prior knowledge to be able to help connect other students who might not understand a topic? Any questions or need for clarification?
No questions for now.
Okay. So another scaffold that you can do with your students is, we call it a think aloud. So when you are working with your students, for example, you're doing maybe a math problem, a think aloud is you are explaining your students the steps that you go through in your head. So instead of assuming what they might know about going through a problem, you would then walk them through your entire thought process in order for them to understand. I like to throw in a mistake during my think aloud and see if any students are able to catch when I make a mistake. And if they don't, I can go through with my thinking out loud to my students and say, oh, you know, I made this mistake here. I should fix this because maybe the 2 was actually supposed to be a 3 because I did my math wrong in this section. And so when you do a think aloud with your students, they're able to understand out loud your thinking when you want them to do a problem. And so that way it helps them understand how they should think when they're doing the same thing. And so when you start off with a question or with an assignment and you want them to be able to understand what you were doing, what you would like them to do, you can speak out loud what you would want their brains or thought process to do so that they can understand how to do the steps. Does anybody have any questions about I think aloud to help support your students understand the topic?
No questions for now.
I shall keep going and then you can stop me if anyone has any questions.
All right.
So another scaffold that you can do with your students is we call it guided practice. And so very similar to that think aloud, you start off with you doing it as the educator. They are watching, you are writing, you are talking out loud. And then as you go through, we do it together. So the students are doing the writing, the teacher does the talking, and we work on this together. So students are following along with the teacher as the teacher is teaching. So everyone is doing everything at the same time together, and you are stopping to make sure that students are working with you to understand what the topic is you are doing. So then once you do a couple of the we do, I do, then the point is at that point, most of those students should be able to do the you do. So now that you've walked through the steps as the teacher and you've done the steps together as a classroom, then you will then release that to the students to do on their own and try and do a you do. And so when you're doing these lessons, you can go from an I do, we do, back and forth until you feel comfortable for most of your class to be able to try and do it independently or with a group. Another scaffold. Oh, I told you to stop me. I just want to go back. Do we have any questions?
Any question? No question at this point, Kiana.
Okay. Another scaffold that you can do that includes all of your students in learning is using sentence starters. So if you want your students to be successful in their writing, you can set them up for success and give them sentence starters. Like before, you can have them say like, I think, so that you can help them think about what they want to write about. And these sentence starters can be from just starting the beginning of the sentence, or it can also include some more heavier text or words you want them to use so that they are more successful in their writing. A part of these scaffolds is that they should not have these all of the time. These are just in moments for students who need them in that time. So again, for some science starters, I observed, and so that would help students say that you wanted them to talk about something they observed in your science experiment. Or the cause of this was blank, and so that happened because of blank, right? So we are setting these students up for success so that they can understand what you want them to write about when you have them write about their science learning. And so you can come up with these sentence stems ahead of time so that you know what you're looking for what you want your students to say when you want them to write about their learning. Are there any questions about scaffolding with sentence starters?
No questions for now.
you can use in your classrooms, which I'm sure most of you do, is you can use visual representations to help them understand the topic. So you can have them use pictures. So when you're learning about, in this example, I have a picture of a plant. You can have students write down the parts of the plant and draw a picture, because it is important that we understand that there is an A in STEM. And when we add that art and writing down the pictures into our learning, it helps students be able to visually see what they are learning about. You can also use graphic organizers or note takers to help guide their learning, because those are super important for students that do not have the ability to take notes on their own. They can use things like a note organizer or a note taker to help them process through their learning. And so again, you don't need to give these to all of your students, but if you know you have some students in your classrooms who have a hard time processing through what you were saying, or they are not good at taking notes, you can supply them with these note takers to help them guide their learning through what you were trying to teach or lecture to them. Does anybody have any questions on this one?
No questions for now. One question, sorry.
Okay.
There's one question.
Okay, thank you. In the case of using visual representations, pictures, charts, or graphs, now will you come back to the challenges for us to be advocates in STEM? That is, I said, okay, in the case of using visual representations, say pictures, charts, graphs, note organizers, we come back to the challenge of us being advocates in STEM because of lack of resources. Yes, as per the Cameroonian context where we are having, and we also talk about the classroom size. How do we manage this? Using charts? How do we manage maybe even just having just our Android phones? Because it is really rare to see schools in the Cameroonian context having projectors. Like in a class of 70, which is supposed to have something like projectors, which where you can just do a video presentation and you just come, you project it in front of the class. But you see 70, even up to 150 students. How are you going to manage that, the visual representation?
So I'm going to clarify the question so I understand what you're saying. So your question is how do you manage creating visualization representation with a class size so big? So my response to that would be then everyone can get that support. When we talk about resources, what resources do you have in your classrooms? Can you give me an example of some of the resources you have? We can try and find a way to make this work.
It is true that here in Cameroon, we don't really have resources as concerned with us teaching, not only in the science department, not only in technology, engineering or mathematics, but even also in the arts department. There are no resources. Okay, it is easy also for a teacher maybe to get something like a working tablet, maybe which he or she can use to prepare notes on. But now projecting it to a class, in the case where you have to maybe give them a little video, because I know, what students watch or what kids watch, they much more come to retain it than what you tell them. So the resources, basically, it's something like your phone, just your cell phone, or maybe your working tablet, or just your computer, or in some cases, not even the computers, they are not available. Or in some cases, you might have charts, or it might be some cardboards, but in some cases, you might not have them.
I just want to say, what we really need in Cameroon now is to understand these processes and these approaches. I can guarantee you that we have already a lot of resources. I'll give you a simple example. Every student, whether he or she has a mobile phone or not, can connect to a mobile phone. So if you have a class with something that you intended to project, You cannot project in class. But if you want the student to get contact with that content before they come to your class, they will definitely do it. My daughter is in a school, there are so many students in their class, children, pupils. Every Monday, you know what Monday means in the Northwest. The school sends assignments through the mobile phone, and the parents download the assignments, deal with it with their students, and then when they're going to school the next day, the teacher is just correcting the assignment. So it's about us really deciding that we have to go out of the way. Thank you.
Okay. There's a lot to add on this specific topic. Before we are adding on more, I'm also trying to add something. So, like this is to really set the direction of our workshop to go in the right direction. Like Mr. Ngang rightly said, it's really about us getting the methodologies already. Let's get the methodologies that we implement, that we will need to implement effective adoption and retention of STEM curriculums. When it comes to resources, we know our difficulties, but exactly like he said, we will make do with what we have. Like, we are all very passionate. The fact that we are all here right now means we are passionate. We are determined to push STEM forward. So with the little we have, if it's even to show them pictures on papers, we will do that. But it's primordial for us to understand the right methods in doing this, the right methods to have students be inclusive, to retain, and really be engaged. Okay, so who else wanted to contribute? All right.
Okay, once more, thank you. Yeah, just in line to say with what you said, I think I developed this idea because I started teaching in a purely rural area where we could last 2 months without electricity, except you go for a weekend before you can charge your phone. Then now what I used to do is this. I look at my topics, and when I go to where I have electricity, I charge my phones, and then I download the chat and the videos, most often the pictures, so that when I am teaching now, I am presenting on the telephone, I go from one student to the next and I present. Then now in a town setting where I am, since we don't have the laboratory, we don't have the projector, I now open my computer and then I download those video chats or those videos. I take, for example, when I was teaching this topic, the atomic structure. I had to download the atomic structure and download the movement of electrons around the nucleus. So when I am explaining, I just open my computer and I move from one bench to the next. And students are seeing how electrons are orbiting the nucleus, and they have a perfect understanding because it is just to improvise with what we have. When I'm teaching like an acid, I just ask them to bring their lemon, the limes, and so on and so forth. Because I know we have pure environments where we cannot have access to anything that has been manufactured. Thank you.
Okay. My question is this. My question is about, I just want you to share the experience that you have had with the most difficult student, especially going through the scaffolding that you're talking about, the most difficult experience, because students may not appropriate the concepts all at the same time, and you have to move on. So what is the most difficult challenge that you've had with a student, so that we can learn from those experiences and maybe try to adopt some of those methods that you have had in your class? I would like you to share maybe with the most difficult student that you have had. Thank you.
I don't think there's any other questions, so we can maybe answer this one.
Okay.
Do you want us to answer the question before we move on to the other one?
Yeah, we'll answer this one.
Okay.
So I have had several students who come to my classroom with special needs and very severe special needs. So for example, students with severe autism or something along those lines, where I've had to change the task in a way that meets a skill they are trying to get. So for example, I might not be worried that they understand the parts of a stem, but I do want them to understand what a flower is. So I'm changing the task a little bit to make it much more simple. And this is for students with those special needs. So they're still learning and they're still getting the skills they need. However, I'm making it much less complex.
So along the same lines, a lot of our students that come here might not speak English as their first language. And so I've had experiences in my classroom where the students I've taught do not understand my language or that I'm speaking. And so I've had to break down my learning as well and connect with them in ways of where they do understand words. So like I will find conjugates of words that students might understand to help build. I'll use lots of picture support, lots of being able to draw out what I want them to do instead of asking them to maybe write as I would expect my other students. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Conjugate is like the beginning of words, so that students are seeing the beginning of words that look familiar to words that they know, and using the resources that we have in our classroom, like having other students help them translate, using material that is interesting for them to help get them to be able to understand the topic that we are talking about. Other students that have trouble in classrooms like that are reading at a lower level than everyone else, I might give them a easier text that is about the same topic. So while one part of the class might be reading about, you know, the structure of a flower and the text and the vocabulary in there might be stronger or heavier, might be a little bit more difficult. Students that have like a mental disability or aren't as strong as readers might get a text of the same information, but the text itself is a little bit easier for them to read and for them to comprehend. Again, this text might have more picture support and labels that help them understand the text better by visually seeing. You can give students oral readings so that they can listen to what you are reading instead of having to read it. Understanding the type of learners that you have in your classrooms, like kinesthetic learners, which is learners that like to use their hands to learn, or visual learners. Once you understand, I know your classrooms are big, but once you have those students that you notice struggle a little more than others, you can find ways to help them in particular ways that is best fit for them as a student.
Thank you, Kiana. Is there another question? Okay.
Thank you. My question is about the think aloud method. Yes, I was saying that my question is about the think aloud method, because I would like you to tell me more about it. I don't know, who is the person doing the task? Is it the students thinking aloud or the teacher? I would like to know, to know how we can implement it, please.
With a think aloud, the teacher is doing it. So if you have the students if you want to teach a topic to the students, you will walk them through your thinking as a teacher on how you would solve the problem. And instead of doing it in your head, you would walk the students through your entire thought process or your thinking on how to solve the problem. Does that make a little bit more sense? So when we're doing a math problem, for example, you could try to think of how I can best explain this. I'm so sorry. When you think aloud, you are talking out loud through all of the steps that you would do in your head out loud. So I think when we teach, sometimes when we're explaining something, we don't always give our full thinkings out loud. And so if you do a think aloud, you're walking the students through how you would think through a problem, like including mistakes you might make in your head, the steps that you might need to process through. So you do this so that students are able to hear how you would walk through this problem as if you were solving the problem yourself.
I could give just a really brief example. So say, for example, the problem is you need to know how many students are in a room. It's a really basic problem. I might count each student individually, and I'm saying this all out loud to students. I might count every single one of you individually, but I don't want to do that because there's faster ways for me to solve this problem. How about I know that there are 5 kids at every table, so let me just count by 5s, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, until I get all of the students. Really, all you're doing, like Kiana said, is just showing them how you're solving problems.
Okay. I equally wanted to know whether the visual representation can be a valuable alternative for the classical notes. In fact, replacing the classical notes that we give to students when we are giving a lesson. Thank you.
Sorry, the internet cut out, and so we were able to hear what you said. Can you repeat that?
I said I wanted to know whether the visual presentation could be an alternative, valuable alternative for the classical notes that we give to students, to the extent that, because for example, you took the flower, generally give the various parts of the flower, and we come under and give the functions of the part. Does that picture of the flower, can I just present it and delete or replace the notes that usually accompany these images? Thank you.
Yes, you can. And you can also have students draw that visualization with their notes to help them understand what you were teaching them. So again, that is a scaffold that you can use in your classroom to break down students' understanding on the parts of the flower. And then what you could do after that is have students then take those words on that paper and then write down the definition of what that means. And so it is there as a step for students to be able to visually see what a stem looks like on a flower, instead of assuming that they know what it is. Now they can visually see the stem and they're able to add information to it to help build their knowledge. And so when we talk about this visual learning, we want the kids to draw the picture with you. It's not you looking at it and showing them. This is them being a part of that learning and having that physically in front of them to use as a support. Does that answer your question? Yeah,
Yeah, sorry, one thing I want to add, because I think it's a great question. John's explained it really well. I just want to add that as scientists, we're not always just taking notes, right? When we're actually doing science, we might be drawing pictures, or we might be just doing little bullet points. So this also gives them another tool that scientists use in real life.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Perry. Thanks, Kiana. I think that answers the question. Okay. Is there any other question? Okay. One more question.
Yes, I wanted to ask what method of scaffolding can permit us establish classroom practices that ensures every student has an opportunity to answer questions given our large classroom sizes in Cameroon?
I think that you all obviously face a challenge that we don't necessarily have. And so if paper and pencil is available, they may not be able to ask the question in class, but they may be able, if they have that skill, to write the question down. And then for you as the teacher, not only will you give them an opportunity to ask the question, but it'll also help you in your lesson planning to kind of cover what may have been missed or to review. So if there's a way, if paper and pencil is available and they have the skill to write it down, you may, and let them know you may not get to all their questions today, but it may help you in that conversation around scaffolding or scheduling, help you see what you need to cover or maybe go back over. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps, Tiffany. Thank you. And I really believe that some of these challenges that are being brought up are some of the things that we need to brainstorm on, yes, ourselves, because Tiffany, Perry, and Kiana are not very familiar with the challenges, the very particular challenges that we have here. But the overall methodologies that they are given can definitely be implemented and translated here, us taking that and adapting it to our landscape. Is there another question? One more question.
Hello all. Please, my question is that how to bring together this approach that is new for us in our educational system, because here in Cameroon you have competencies approach. How to bring this new techniques or this new approach together to facilitate the approach, the integration in our pedagogy. Thank you.
So that is still the same thing. Yeah, it's really, yes. These are really questions for us to brainstorm on.
If I were to be asking questions that can help us, for example, I'll be trying to know, because what a lot of us are seeking here now is to get the best of training we can get in the STEM approach to education. If I have to get anything from our partners and our friends out in the US, since they seem to be leading actually in this approach, I'll be finding out how we can equip ourselves. How can teachers who really want to get, for example, I'm seeking to do a master's degree in STEM education. How do I go about it? Because there's no school in Cameroon that offers a master's degree in STEM education. So I think those are questions that we need to be asking, but most of the questions we are asking are to be answered by us. Because if somebody in his whole life has never taught a class of more than 30 students, he cannot be telling what to do with 60 students. So
I think are there any other questions here? Okay, so Tiffany, I don't know what you think about what Mr. Ngang just said. I mean, I'm really trying to orientate the questions here towards the very purpose of the workshop, really having these methods implemented. In the following days, like we did today earlier before we connected, we're doing some brainstorming on the very particular challenges that we have here. And those are things we do that we're going to be doing each day before we connect with you guys. So I think these particular challenges that are only keen to us I've been writing them down, some of them. So we're going to keep on brainstorming on those for the workshop session, the hour we have before we connect with Tiffany and Perry and Kiana.
Okay, yeah, I like it.
All right.
So go ahead and move on. Emmanuel, we can't see you all on screen, so I'm not sure what happened. I can hear you, we just can't see you.
Exercise, exercise, exercise.
Yeah, no, there's just an issue with the camera. We're working on it.
Okay, thank you. So you can you see us, Emmanuel?
Yes, we can see you.
Oh, okay, we can see you now.
Getting feed from us now.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on.
Okay, so I have 2 scaffolds left. This one we kind of touched and talked about earlier, which is your partners and your groupings. Yeah, so with your classroom sizes of your size, I think this scaffold in particular will be very helpful for you, which is you can group students based off of their ability. So you could do a group where all the students perform the same and have the same intellect, and you can group them based off of your low students can be in a group, and so on and so forth. Or you can break these students up into groups of ability and set leaders in your classroom that can support the learning of the students in your groups. This is important and can be very helpful when you do have these large group sizes, and you can rely and have those other students help you teach and guide the students in the classroom. I think it is important to have this so that you can even strengthen the students that are intelligent so that they are able to one up and be able to explain it is another level of understanding of a topic. I didn't want to go too much deeper into groupings because we talked about this one earlier, but does anybody have any questions about grouping our students?
Yes, one question.
Yeah, you mentioned grouping students according to their ability. I want to know whether gender is one of the components that we have to take into consideration to group the students, or we have to make students only made up of girls and others only of boys. I don't know, maybe for a sort of competition, or do we have to take gender into account when pairing these groups? Thank you.
I do not think you need to take gender into account. We look at students as a whole and not based off of their gender. And so I don't know what traditions and policies you have with gender in your classrooms. But for us here in America, gender does not make a difference in what our groupings look like. You can have all girls in a group, all boys in a group, or boys and girls. We're just looking at their ability levels and their intellect and using those groupings to help support other students in the classroom, regardless of their gender.
Thank you, Kiana. Just to add more on that, we're definitely striving for inclusiveness in STEM learning. So even if we have to translate scaffolding here and we're trying to do groupings, we definitely do not have to look at gender. We have to be completely blind and oblivious to gender and just group the students. That way, everybody feels equal and they feel they can strive equally.
Okay, we will move on. And the last section for scaffolding for our students is breaking your lesson into smaller sections. So when you are watching when you are teaching your lessons and you are noticing that some of your students are struggling, you can break down what you're learning even deeper for students to understand. So when we are planning our lessons, we should look at individual pieces instead of it as a whole. So I put a picture of a puzzle on there to help understand that the full puzzle is your entire lesson. And when we break the lesson into smaller chunks, and we call that chunking, it will help students be able to be successful and understand the topic a little better when we break it down and teach it into smaller sections. And so this can, sorry. So this could be on a day-to-day. So instead of teaching a whole lesson in one day, you can teach your lesson over the 5 days or however many days you need to help support students be able to understand it a little better by breaking it down into smaller sections. And you could do that by, as Tiffany mentioned, getting an understanding of your students and where they are to better support what they need in the classroom. Anybody have any questions?
No questions for now. Okay, one question.
Okay, thank you. I think the question I have right now is really, I want you to share your experiences on how you are carrying out the STEM out there. So my question is, given that students learn differently and at different paces, what has been your most successfully designed tasks for students so that they appropriate the skills using the most basic things that you have in your own classrooms? Thank you.
Give us a second to think about that. That's a very good question.
I would say one of my most successful lessons was when I was teaching long division to students. I did the scaffolding, a lot of the different scaffolding that Ms. Bunting mentioned. I did a model where I did a problem on my own, walking them through my thinking. Then I had all the class do it together, where we all went over a problem. We switched back and forth on several problems where I would do a problem, they would do a problem. Then I had students break off and do the problem in teams of 2. It was all on pencil and paper. And then they came back. We talked about problems that they had while solving it. Then I had them do problems individually, or sorry, problems on their own. So they had experience not only working in a group and in partners, but by themselves. And during that time where they were working on their own, I was able to go up to individual students and help them with anything they were struggling with. And students that were successful and could do long division on their own went off and did the problems on their own. I think that was successful because every student got what they needed. And if you were doing the problem really well, then you were able to help other students or go further in your division.
I think a successful lesson that I have done that has incorporated some of these scaffolds is having students do their science notebook and then have each other check their notebooks as groupings. So one group would check each other's notebooks, and then they would go and find another group and they would build on each other's notebooks and making sure that no one has missed anything and that everyone is understanding the concepts. And when they are sharing out their information in these notebooks, it is giving students the opportunity to hear what other students have done, as well as for the students that are explaining, giving them a better understanding by having to explain their thinking to other students. So this was very student-led in the sense that they were in charge of their learning and they were able to take in information from their peers with their peers using their language that they use together.
Thank you, Kiana. Another question? Okay,
Okay, thank you. I just want to share a little bit of my experience using the scaffold, especially in the place of breaking lessons into smaller sections. As a computer science teacher, so what I did for Form 5's practicals as they prepare for GCE is I print a GCE question paper, that's paper 3. Now, I was assigning. Okay, when I print a paper 3 question for the GCE, I assign group 1, this is what you're doing. Group 2, you're doing this. Group 3, you're doing this. Group 4, you're doing this. So when I assign them, I can give 2 groups can be doing the same thing, and other 2 groups doing the same thing, and another 2 groups doing the same thing. So I give them time. I give them a time limit. So when it's time, also some will even present, will tell you they are done before time, and some might be the time is up, but yet they are not through. So when the first group finishes, okay, you wait, close your computer, and I will check your work, and you stop. The second group like that, and when I finish checking, you will come and share with the students what you did and how you went about it, how you did it. So when you share, every person will be like, okay, let me come and see what you just did. Let me see. So what did you do here? What did you do here? And then you be the one to explain now to your classmates what you did and how you did it. So it works. So that is my own experience.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
There is a question in the chat that says, how can teachers assess whether students have truly grasped the smaller sections of STEM concepts before moving on to more advanced topics?
A lot of times in some of the lessons that I do, I'll do what is called an exit ticket, which is just one question that tells me whether or not a student got a concept or got an idea that we were working on that day. And they'll answer that question when they leave, so that I can see very quickly which students understood that question and which student didn't. That's just one quick check that I will do every day.
Does that, hopefully that answers your question, Mr. Graff, in the chat.
Okay, I have something to add on the experiences on how to teach effectively a STEM classroom, or my experiences. What I often do is that whenever I break the students into groups, there are 2 components which I make use of a lot. After they have done their work, there must be, I know that they must collaborate, and they must have the presentation. Even when I've checked their tasks, because they submit the tasks to me, I go through the tasks before they do the presentation in class. In the course of sharing, they have their way. The students always have a way of communicating and sharing their ideas that the other learners, they easily learn from them. So while they're doing that, you find that the students are more interactive, and then they share their ideas. They even ask questions to their peers, and then they answer those questions with ease. This actually shows that when you master, when you plan ahead of time, and then you break down the tasks such that you assign all the learners in class in a mixed ability group, they will easily help others. And even in the course of communication or presentations, the learners will teach other learners effectively. And then you do the assessment. Easily you ask them, so who did not understand this? Who wants more information on this? Then you find them actually sharing again. That's what I always do. Thank you.
We want to apologize for the background noise. Our program is actually on a military base. So sometimes when you're hearing the announcement, it's announcements from the base. So we apologize for that. Any other questions before we move on?
No other question?
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on.
Yes. Yes, Tiffany, you can move on.
Okay. One second.
We're having some technical issues on our end too.
All right.
Go. No, we're not.
Almost there. See, we have technology problems too.
All right. Okay, we're gonna go over, just give you a show, I'm sorry, we're gonna show you a hands-on lesson that we do in our classroom. And I'll walk you through some of the things that we're thinking while we're teaching it to students to give you a bigger picture. It's gonna start with. Sorry, a lot of announcements today, I guess. This is gonna start with a video. This video is exactly how Kiana and I would start a lesson with the students. So I'm gonna play it so you're able to see the video and how we started.
All right, so Perry's gonna tell you again what this video is and what lesson it is, and then we'll get started.
This lesson is called Pop Goes the Fizz. It's one of the science lessons that Kiana and I do with our 10 and 11-year-olds. This video you're about to see is exactly how we would start the lesson with the student. Okay, this lesson is called Pop Goes the Fizz. It is our introduction, or what we would start the lesson with, is our engagement, and also shows students what they're going to be doing throughout the lesson.
So I'm first pouring the Alka-Seltzer into our film canister, and then I pour our 10 milliliters of water inside of it, and I close it quickly, flip it over, and we wait for it to pop. And then I'm going to take a sticky note, and so I mark it on the tube so that I remember how high up it went.
Okay, this lesson is called Pop Goes the Fizz. Okay, so like I said in the video, this is how we're going to start the lesson. We start with something that grabs the student's attention so that we can see that they're all looking at us and they're ready to go. We mentioned a few different things in this lesson, sodium bicarbonate and Alka-Seltzer. That can also be replaced with baking soda as well. So next, after they have seen that demonstration, we give the students a problem that engineers and scientists would face in the real world. So oftentimes I'll have students read this paragraph individually or on their own, or as a whole group. I'll have one student read it and everyone else is listening and picking out the information that is important in the paragraph. So I'll read it to you, and then I'll talk about some things that students often point out while they are listening to the paragraph. Okay. High Flying Toys is preparing to release a new pop rocket kit, which uses a film canister, water, and Alka-Seltzer. Market studies show their target group, 8 to 13-year-old students, would be happy if the rocket reaches a height of 140 centimeters. High Flying Toys, however, does not know how much Alka-Seltzer to include in the package to reach this height. They want to include the least amount as possible, since this could potentially save the company thousands of dollars when selling the kits. Your teams of chemists, engineers, mathematicians, and reporters will conduct an investigation to determine how much fuel Alka-Seltzer is necessary to launch the rocket to the minimum desired height. So like I said, this is presenting students with a problem. And I love this start because it has students do the work that real scientists would be doing in their field. And it has them, challenges them to think scientifically about what we are doing. So some of the basic information that's usually pointed out in this paragraph is, one, we are working for a company. That company is High Flying Toys. They also are usually pretty good at picking out the materials or the things they are going to be using. For example, in this experiment, they're going to use a film canister, water, and Alka-Seltzer. And they're usually pretty good at identifying the age group. So we are doing this experiment for 8 to 13-year-old students. And that we want the rocket to go at least 140 centimeters.
And I'll add that just because the experiment is for 8 to 13-year-olds, this can be an experiment for any age group. And so that work around teamwork, identifying the scaffolding, it does not have to just be for 8 to 13-year-olds. This can be high school, this can be even college students that are starting to build some understanding around a STEM project like this, or a STEM lesson like this.
Some things that students have trouble pointing out and sometimes require scaffolding or thinking from the teacher is the idea that they want to use the least amount of Alka-Seltzer as possible. This is a good conversation to have when we're talking about business and that businesses want to make money. Businesses want to make money. So, sorry, one second, let me get back to the screen. The less Alka-Seltzer we use in our package, the more money we are going to make. Oh, also, we scaffold the students' thinking to understand that the Alka-Seltzer is the one thing we do not know about. So we know we are using a film canister, we know we're using water, and we do not know how much Alka-Seltzer we're going to use. I'll stop there to see if you have any questions.
Are there any questions, Emmanuel?
No questions.
Okay.
So after they understand the task and they know what they're going to be doing, I like to show them a picture of all of the things they are going to be using. And I ask them, how can we use these 3 things and create an experiment that tells us how much Alka-Seltzer or sodium bicarbonate we are going to use. Now, although I already know how the experiment is going to go, this, showing them the materials and asking them this question prior to this or before this, has them think like scientists and come up with an experiment on their own. What I want students to focus on while doing this is that, one, we're going to have to do this test more than once. We can't do it one time because one time will not give us enough information. Also, I want them to notice that we don't have a tool that measures height. So students need to realize that we need to add something in order for us to measure the height of the Alka-Seltzer. Sorry, the height of the rocket. In our classroom, we use those tubes you saw in the video. On those tubes, the height is marked exactly how high, or sorry, the height is marked on the tube, so we know exactly how high the film canister went. However, you could also do this with a ruler or some sort of tape measure. Ms. Bundy is going to show you. Bundy right here is showing you one of the tubes that we use to place over the film canister. You'll see here that we have different measurements written on the tube. So they're able to mark how high it goes easily. And you could do this with a ruler or measuring tape. This just helps keep the rocket contained in that tube. I'll stop there to see if there's any questions before I move on.
Any questions? No questions for now, Perry.
Thank you. All right, now that we have designed our experiment, we need to figure out how much Alka-Seltzer or sodium bicarbonate we are going to put in each trial in our film canister to watch it explode. So what I typically do is I walk students through finding the mass of each tablet. So on the screen, you'll see on the far left. On the far left, you'll see that a fourth of a tablet is 0.8 grams or 0.8 of a gram. I then tell students if a fourth of a tablet is 0.8 of a gram, then how much is 1/2 of a tablet? Typically, it'll take students a while to understand this, and sometimes I'll give them an algorithm or a way to solve the problem on the screen. Ms. Bunting is, Kiana is writing right now. This just helps students. This is a scaffold that helps students that can't do this math in their head. So after they've added it, I'll ask students how much is 1/2 a tablet, and they'll say, well, it's 1 6/10 of a gram, or 1.6 grams. And we'll do the same thing for 3/4 of the tablet and 1 whole tablet. Having given the students time to do this math really highlights that in science, we are doing math, and it connects these subjects so that they understand we're doing STEM as a whole, and we're not just doing science. Another thing I like that is on this page is towards the bottom of the screen, you'll see the question, how much water? During the first paragraph, students learned that we are not changing the amount of water. So this tells them exactly how much water we are using and helps them remember we are only using 10 milliliters. So every single experiment we use will be 10 milliliters. Are there any questions about this slide?
Any questions? No questions for now, Perry. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, you've seen this before. We talked about this in terms of jobs. Now we have 4 jobs each, and these are the jobs that each student will do during the experiment when they do it in their smaller groups. So while they're doing the experiment, I'm not helping, I'm just walking around and facilitating or making sure, seeing if students need help while they are doing the experiment. Are there any questions about the jobs? I know we covered this during the last slides.
Any questions? No questions, Perry.
All right, now safety is #1 We like to be very thorough and go very slowly through the safety slide, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong when using this film canister and Alka-Seltzer. So first, we give students safety glasses for the whole investigation. We want to make sure that they have those on the whole time. We let them know that the film canister can take a long time to pop. We're going to do very quickly. We have had several experiments where film canisters have hit students in the face. So we remind them that these are very important. Never look at the loaded film canister. Never point it at someone else. If there's any spills, clean them up. Don't remove the cap from our tube, the tube that Ms. Bunting showed you. And you need to remain in your space the entire time. This slide sets the expectation of what students need to be doing. And it makes it very clear that we are not playing around, we are only doing our jobs. Finally, over the times that Kiana and I have done this, we've realized that some students need some hints. This could be also considered a scaffold. It's just, we're giving students information so that they can be successful every single time. And on the screen, you'll see some of the hints that we give students. So for example, we're going to use 10 milliliters of water every time. They've now seen that 3 times, so it should be very clear how much water they are using. The chemist should close the film canister tightly.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
Yes, Tiffany, we can hear you. Sorry, we had some network issues. We are back.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay.
I'm not sure where you cut out.
I think right around. We went out for more than 20 seconds. So.
I'll go to the slide. Were you able to hear?
No.
Were you able to hear the
We didn't see any. We didn't see any of this.
Okay, this is just an example of what pop goes up is, or what this experiment looks like when students are in their small groups. So we're going to play the video so you can see exactly what it looks like. Looks like our video is having trouble loading. We'll try it one more time and see if we can get it to work. Sorry, we're just getting noise here. I'll just explain to you. Basically, the students are doing the experiment. Every student has their own job. And they are marking the height of each launch, and then writing that number down in their book, so that we have the data that we can go over after they are done with the experiment. Are there any questions? I know that you couldn't see the video. Are there any questions about how students do the experiment?
Any questions? No, no questions for now.
Thank you. All right, now that the experiment is done, we collect the data that the students went over, and they give me all of their data. So I'm gonna pull up on the screen, you're gonna see a graph. This is just a fake graph that I made. This is typical student data that you will see. On here, you'll see the height of 4 different groups. So in this, on 1/4 of a tablet, team 1 went 55 centimeters, team 2 went 100 centimeters, team 3, 200 centimeters, and then finally 80 centimeters. Now, every time we do this experiment, we have some students who make a mistake, or they don't get a full launch. So on 1/2 of the tablet, you'll see I put 0 centimeters. That's just to represent that not all students were able to complete the experiment. You'll also see that on 1 whole. You'll also see 0 centimeters there as well. And this is a really good conversation to have with students to show them that in science, we don't always get the data that we think we will get. Sometimes our information is really low, sometimes it's really high. So us as scientists, we need to do things that help us see the patterns. So this is a lot of information in this table. How can we make this information clear? How can we get general information from it? So what we do as scientists is we find the average for each trial. So we add all 4 trials up and then divide it by that number of trials. So 55 plus 100 plus 200 plus 80, and then divide that by 4. And then you'll get the average, which is in the table above, 108 and 75 hundredths of a centimeter. This helps students see that although we got 0 on some, we're looking at the whole. We're looking at everyone's trial, not just one group's. Because as scientists, we don't just look at one piece of information, we like to look at all of the information. So up on the table on top, you'll see all the averages for each trial. Trial 1, 108, trial 2, 115, trial 3, 152 and 5/10, trial 4, 126 and 25 hundredths. Are there any questions about how we find averages or how we collect the information?
I have a question, but not about averages or how the information is collected. This experiment is done in various stages. There's definitely stages where students are going to be more engaged or more willing to really do the thing, like when it's popping and everything, and are putting things together. And then when you come to the math and start calculating averages, some students will just shy away and they wouldn't really get it. So how do you, I mean, I know we have the having them do different jobs and all, but how will you keep a student engaged through the life cycle of an experiment like this, that is to help them grasp key concepts when they might really not, when some students will just see numbers and they will freeze and they can't do anything. But when it comes to doing, making the actual experiment, making the pop fees and all that, they will be really engaged at that moment. And these 2 things help them to understand the entirety of it very well, but at some point they disengage, especially when we are having a table with so many numbers.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. You're right that the math is definitely lower engagement and it's difficult for some students. What I'm doing right now is I'm talking about the whole process. When I'm doing it with students, I'm going a little bit slower. All of the math we do together as a group. So say, for example, students they're scared to find the average for 1/4 of a tablet. They are also working in a group so that if they are struggling or if they are confused, the group can help them. Then we also go over the information as a whole. Go over this very slowly because the math is very difficult. Another thing that I like to mention on this slide is that we are solving that problem at the beginning. So although this is difficult, when we are doing science, these are the parts that we need to use and then we need to do in order to answer our question as a whole. But I will say that you're right that this is definitely less engaging. So we do move through this slide a little bit faster and we make sure that everyone's on the same page before we move on. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that answers my question, Perry. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now that we have a whole table of data, we have all those averages, they're still hard to understand for some students. And they're hard to understand for scientists also. So what we do is we graph the information in a way that makes sense, where we can see exactly what we want to see. So let me go to the next slide for you. We only have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to go through this as quickly as possible. Just so you know, we might go over just a few minutes if that's okay.
All right.
Okay, so after we have that table, we've gone over all of the averages. I typically have students graph the data using a bar diagram. You'll see that on the board. Now, I've already filled this one out for us. You'll see that the green bar represents 1/4 of a tablet, the red bar 1/2, all the way to the full tablet. This graphing the information helps students who are not very good at visualizing numbers. They can see the information rather than looking at the numbers. Then what I do is I draw a line across 140, which you'll see a bright yellow line going across the graph. Having that line helps students see exactly which trial got above 140 and which ones didn't. And they use this information to answer the question at the beginning of the PowerPoint. Which trial should we use in our rocket? Oh, sorry, let me stop before I move on. Are there any questions about graphing or visualizing the data?
Yes, one question.
Okay.
My question is focused on the experimental data. When I look at the data, you did not talk about precision. I wish to ask if at this level, you don't pay attention on the precision of the instrument you are using, because precision of the instrument will equally help you, the student, to write down the values correctly. Now, when you look at this, the launch plotter here, you find 108.75, 115, and then 152.5, 126.25. So what is the precision of the burette, or the tube that you use, or the ruler that you use?
I appreciate you bringing up that question. So when we talk about data, we talk about errors that often happen. So things that could go wrong. Maybe the group didn't put enough Alka-Seltzer in. Maybe they put too much water. Now at this age level, 10, 11-year-olds, I might not talk about the precision of the given instrument. However, if I were teaching slightly older, maybe 13, 14-year-olds, that would be another thing I would talk about when measuring information, because we want them to think like scientists, and that's exactly what scientists would think about, is the precision of it. So if I was teaching an older group, that's how I would change it to incorporate that.
Thank you, Perry.
Yep. Now that they have graphed the information, they can see the results. They have averages in front of them also. We go back to that original question. Say, which tablet amount should we recommend high-flying toys package in their rocket kit? They check the one that they think, and then give an answer, a written answer on why they think that. Now, Ms. Bunting mentioned sentence starters. This is a good opportunity where you could use sentence starters. So for example, I might put on the screen, high-flying toys should package blank, because all students have to do is give their explanation rather than focusing on the sentence. Now, not all students are engaged or want to write. So what we can do is we basically tell them, if you have a really good response, we're going to give you something. You can give them a good grade. That could be a reward for them. We don't do grades in Starbase. So instead we use dog tags, or we give them a little plastic circle that we 3D printed. So I tell the students, if you're able to do these 4 things, then I will give you this dog tag as a reward. The 4 things they need to do is use full sentences and correct spelling. Use information from that bar graph we created as a whole. I want to see that they're using words like centimeters and grams. And they're using the vocabulary that we used in the experiment, such as mass, height, average, Alka-Seltzer, sodium bicarbonate. Now they don't need to use all of the words, but I would like to see that they're using some of them. And this is also, this sentence is how I'm going to see if students understood what we were doing or not. Are there any questions about how we wrap up the lesson?
Any question? No question, Perry.
Thank you. And that is the first example of a hands-on experiment that we would do in our classroom. Tomorrow, Kiana is going to give you another example talking about the concept of buoyancy.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think we are out of
Daniel, I have to head out, but you are in good hands, because I have to go to another meeting. So I want to say thank you to Perry and Kiana, and thank you to all of you all for being on the call today. So looking forward to the next 2 days.
awesome. Thank you. Thank you all. And see you tomorrow.
And we will see you tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wednesday in person, so see you on Saturday.